I'm Michael, a high school student living in Ohio, USA. I was not your A-grade student, and to be frank, I hated studying. Going to school every morning is quite tiring for me. As usual, I sat on the school bus to school. I sat in the last row, trying to relax by listening to music. I paid little attention to my classmates sitting in the vehicle. At a pickup stop, I suddenly had a strange feeling in my body. It was very difficult to describe. I paid attention to my surroundings, sat up straight, and looked out the window. I looked towards the small house where the bus was stopping. That was Mark's house. I knew that house. Mark and I studied together since elementary school. Mark is a quiet guy. He's shy, always sits in one place and doesn't have many friends. Everyone at school is impressed with Mark because of his excellent academic achievements. I used to act very mean to Mark just to satisfy my growing ego. One time, I poured so much glue into Mark's school bag that the whole lesson Mark sat with his head down, not knowing what to do. Or another time, I lured Mark to the women's restroom and poured paint all over the floor, causing him to slip and fall in front of the girls. But seeing Mark helpless and embarrassed made me laugh out loud. Thinking back, I feel so guilty. Back to that school morning. The bus stopped for a while, but Mark was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a hand passed through the car window and waved for the driver to move without having to pick him up. It seems like it's Mark's dad. He's probably not feeling well today, I thought briefly. That day of studying was very long, a strange feeling of discomfort creeping up within me, and I didn't do well on the math test today. At the end of the day, I went home exhausted. The feeling of dread and nausea made me angry and grumpy, and I snapped with my parents' concerned questions. That night, I watched the local news channel, and what I heard shocked my parents and me to the core. Mark's entire family was killed by an intruder early this morning. I was speechless when I heard the news. A cold feeling ran down through my body. I returned to my room, falling into an unknown void. The clock on the table ticked the time regularly, but I still couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about the strangeness of this morning's events. Darkness covered the surroundings. I saw Mark's house ahead. Standing at the door was Mark, his face covered in blood and his eyes gloomy, like an invisible soul trying to make contact from another world. Mark stared at me. My body couldn't move. I was extremely scared. Mark came very close, raised his bloody hand to touch my face, neck, and shoulders. Suddenly, he laughed loudly. His eyes and smile were wild. I woke up, startled, and found myself lying in bed, sweating profusely. I panicked and opened my eyes wide, looking at everything around me to make sure everything that had just happened was a dream. I was in my room. The window in the room was open, causing a cold wind to rush in, making me shiver. Suddenly there was laughter. I was startled to see Mark in the corner of the room. I was scared, mumbling in my throat. Surprised, right? Mark looked at me with crazy eyes, completely different from him every day. I slapped my face hard to make sure this wasn't a dream. Mark is still alive. He is right in front of me. Mark went to lock the door and walked towards me with a creepy smile. He slowly pulled out a knife and held it close to my neck to control me. Let me tell you a secret. The murderer who killed the whole family is me. Mark laughed happily. He was crazy. I'm so disgusted and tired of being controlled by my parents. They don't let me do anything but do homework. Yesterday I had to study until 3 a.m. Seeing their faces drove me crazy. I want them to sleep forever, so no one can control me anymore. Using the great knowledge I have from physics and chemistry, it was easy to bypass the police. Every word Mark said made my body cold. I was extremely panicked in front of a crazy man willing to do anything. "You'll be next. Remember those pranks you did on me?" Mark growled. The knife in Mark's hand moved closer to my neck. I could feel the sharp blade about to cut the skin of my neck. I trembled in fear. Mark laughed even more excitedly. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and my mother's voice called out, "Michael, aren't you sleeping yet?" I'm Elon. I'm a high school student in Houston, Texas. I'm an open-minded individual and quite enjoy extracurricular activities at school. One time, my class was informed that they would participate in a community service cleanup session at a local park. Even though I wasn't very excited, being able to run outside was better than having to sit and study, I thought. It was Sunday morning. We arrived at the park at 9 o'clock and were assigned areas to clean. This park has just been built in recent weeks, and there are still some areas in the finishing stages. Me, Anna, and Max were assigned to clean up an area with a very large rock. It was high above my head and placed in a small flower garden. I observed the rock and saw that it had a very strange shape. There's also a cross engraved on the stone, but it seems to be upside down. I told Anna and Max, but they didn't pay attention to what I said. "I guess I'm no expert in landscaping," I muttered. Ignoring the stone's strange appearance, we started cleaning. Max and Anna picked grass in the flower garden, and I will plant a few new flowers. We do this while chatting about interesting stories at school. As it neared the end, I started to smell a terrible stench. It was really nauseating. Anna and Max also noticed that unpleasant smell. We went around the area we were responsible for to find out the source, but didn't find anything unusual. At the end of the labor session, all of us were told to regroup. My team has thoroughly checked the area we are in charge of, so we are confident that everything is clean. It was probably some dead mice somewhere else, and the wind brought in the stench. We told each other that and happily left. A few days later, we organized a picnic ourselves at the park we cleaned, this time with Ethan and Mary. Returning to the flower garden the other day, we were happy because the newly planted flower trees were lush. My friends and I spread out the carpet next to it, ate together, chatted, and took pictures. About 15 minutes later, it suddenly started to rain. We quickly packed up our things and ran to a nearby shack to shelter from the rain. Where we were standing outside the rock, a brown liquid began flowing out. The stench rose again. This time it was much worse. We were stunned to see that strange thing and looked at each other, confusing and scared. About 20 minutes later, the rain stopped. Me, Max, and Ethan came closer for a better look. Mary and Anna fearfully huddled in the shack. Even though I was scared, a feeling of curiosity was taking over me. Reaching out to brush a few flower plants next to the rock away, a feeling of dizziness immediately hits me. I saw human fingers crushed under the stone and they were decomposing. I scream out in fear, almost to a panic attack, crawled out to yell at my friends to quickly call the police. The police arrived and immediately searched the scene. Max and I stayed behind to give our statements to the police, while Ethan took Anna and Mary home first because they were so panicked. The police found out that there was a body crushed underneath and immediately sent the tow to move the stone away. Seeing the entire scene unfold, I was shocked to the core by the corpse underneath. The body was no longer in one piece. It was decomposing. The stench in sight was horrifying to witness. The police thanked Max and I for the cooperation, then told us to go home first. Maybe during construction the stone was placed in a different position and collapsed over the poor worker while he was inspecting the project. So my feeling about the stone's strange position is correct. The man's body was processed and returned to his family.
That stone was later demolished by the park management board, and a flower garden was planted in its place. To this day, that scene still haunts me. Extracurriculars now brings me the dreads. I always imagined that I would discover another terrible thing around there.